The Nigerian Economic Summit Group, in its recently released Macroeconomic Outlook report for 2021, predicted a growth rate of 2.9% for the Nigerian economy in 2021, which is higher than the 1.5% growth rate suggested by the International Monetary Fund. According to the NESG, the twin effects of COVID-19 pandemic and global crash in oil prices exposed the weak macroeconomic fundamentals and led to a recession in Q3 of 2020, with real GDP contracting by 6.1% and 3.6% in the second and third quarters of 2020. For the Nigerian economy to drive towards part of sustainable growth and development in 2021, NESG in its macroeconomic outlook emphasizes 4 priorities essential to deliver a high, sustainable and inclusive economic growth for Nigeria over the next few years, and that the priorities are macroeconomic stability, policy and regulatory consistency, sectoral reforms, and human capital development. To discuss this more and other issues surrounding the Nigerian Economic Summit Outlook for 2021, I have the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Laoye Jayola. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Jayola.
Thank you for having me, Tolu.
Yes, let me start before we go into the details of this document. Many are saying that Nigeria has already been at crossroads even before the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of issues were already on ground. The pandemic just exposed the lapses that were already on ground. I don't know how that comes to you, and how did we get to this point that we are at the moment?
Well, again, if you read our report, everybody know. I mean, there's nobody who does not know that we've had issues before now. And therefore, what happened with the pandemic was just to reveal the underbelly of the Nigerian economy. The Nigerian economy is always dependent on whatever oil prices do. So once oil prices are high, we tend to just spend and then don't prepare for the rainy day. And once they begin to fall, we then run into a problem. And then you will notice that before the pandemic, oil prices were beginning to tank. And that made it worse for us. So it's what we all know, so it's not new.
Now let's now go to the document itself. What were the fundamentals there? We saw the normal scenario, a lot of assumptions, a lot of figures here. Take us through how you arrived at all of this. And a lot of work was put into this research and all of that. What are the fundamentals, CEO?
Well, let me. I listened to your news, and when you started, you were saying that we had projected a 2.9, and the IMF is projected a 1.5% growth. And so if you go on and just take 2.9 just like that, then that doesn't fully capture what our report stated. We did a 3-scenario analysis. We looked at worst case scenario, business as usual, and of course, if we carry on the necessary reforms that we needed to do. And we said, if you do all we need to do as a nation, then we can't be talking about 2.9 growth. That was the basis of premising what we have said. But we said it could be worse, and then we could probably then be negative 9.9%. So the report looked at those 3 scenarios, and therefore, what IMF is saying is that we need to do so much more detailed work than we're doing now, which is again what our report stated. If you look at the point of IMF expressed concern that Nigeria is currently spending 98% of our revenue on debt servicing. Of course, we all know that our revenue for 2020 was significantly low. So we had a revenue of just about 3.3 trillion, when our expense was about 9.2 trillion. So it meant, so it meant that we just had to borrow for all we're doing. So what we are saying, therefore, is that if we continue to do what we are doing without taking the major steps that we need to take as a nation, we will not do well. And what are these major steps? It is clear to us that government does not have all the revenue they need to bring this economy out of the wood. Therefore, government needs private sector investment. And for private sector investment to come, you must make your environment attractive for private sector investment to come. And this is not what we have been saying. This is not what we just started saying today. It's what everybody had said. As a matter of fact, government-owned agency that is charged with the responsibility of promoting investment, the NIPC, came up with a report that was very damning about what the views of investors are to Nigeria as a place of business. Just about a couple of weeks ago, South Africa attracted about $1.1 billion from someone that was going to, one of the car-making firms that was going to start producing cars from Africa, all on the account of CFTA. So you realize that we need to do more. Again, that's not without regard to what the PEBEC is doing, but much more than what PEBEC is doing. We need to do significantly more than we're doing if investments are going to come. And so that is the first thing. And what will make investors come to your country? Number one, investors don't like uncertainty. They want some degree of stability, clarity, and certainty. And when we look at our monetary policy and our fiscal policies, sometimes people don't understand. Sometimes they're wrong, at conflict with one and the other. So the challenge is you need some level of monetary stability in Nigeria. That's the first thing we say. Let there be monetary stability. This inflation that is running, we don't understand. This exchange rate that we still don't know which of the exchanges really will work. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you look at the forward that the central bank did for February transaction, they're going to about 412 thereabout naira to a dollar as against what was obtaining in January. So these are issues that they are concerned about. They want some stability in our monetary system and fiscal system, which is what the IMF is saying. The IMF alluded to the fact that the central bank is funding government deficit. Well, that is neither here nor there, because if one of the roles of central bank is the lender of last result, and they have the deficit that need to be funded, central bank will have to fund it like it's done in the other part of the world. That's what the whole of America and the whole have been doing. The only problem about Nigeria is the fact that if the hole is big, we need to think about how do we plug the hole? How do we ensure that we then don't do this, because it's not sustainable. As long as central bank begins to fund, exchange rate will have implications, and there'll be problems on inflation, there'll be problems for all the things we've all have alluded to. So we need some level of monetary stability, but we need clearly a policy consistency, no flip-flop. I mean, happily, finally, the government is looking at passing the petroleum industry bill. It is good. In fact, that's what I tell people, the lowest hanging fruit for us today. Why did I say so? If you look at other areas other countries that have crude oil like us, they attracted much more investment than we've done. I mean, take a small place like Guyana that attracted almost 40 billion. Egypt there got almost 11 million. And what did we attract in the last couple of years? 3.5. So why is it that people are not coming to Nigeria? So we're saying that whatever it is that the government is doing, and the National Assembly in particular regarding PIB bill, they should do it in such a way that we must be able to compete with other people. Investors will go to environments that are friendly. They're going to Ghana, they're going to South Africa, they're going to Kenya, they're not coming to us. And don't ask me why they're not coming to us. Because even the NIPC, which is Nigeria Investment Promotion Council, have done a detailed report to government on what are the concerns of investors.
All right, see you. Let me butt into you. We need to take a commercial break. We'll be back in a minute, and this discussion will continue. Let me allow you land on that your point. You're making a point, talking about what needs to be done. Before I go to my next question.
Yeah, I said beyond all we've talked about monetary stability and policy consistency, we then talked about how to pay attention to sectors of the economy that have some significant correlation with job creation. Because the fact of the matter is that unemployment is very high. Unemployment was 27% last year. And if you add that to unemployment, we're going above the 50 regions. Now, what it means, therefore, is that in some instances where we even create jobs, the quality of job created are so poor, they're not sufficiently good enough to lift people out of poverty. And so what we did in our report is to look at, and we said this since last year, to look at sectors that have correlation with effective job creation. And we then have said, if you pay attention to those sectors, government, you can lift people out of poverty, and we then can meet the 100 million target that this government is giving themselves. But we need to then work around security. Security is very important. It's become a challenge in the country. It's become a cause of concern. It's been part of the reasons why we have challenges around food crisis this year, towards the end of last year to this year. But one of the things that we pointed out is that government need to look at the human capital development of Nigerians. The pandemic showed the fact that our health stocks are not good enough, and therefore we need to build more hospitals and take care of the people. But beyond that, we need to again look at our people, quality of education, the skills. There's been this talk about the need for us to go to technical vocational education. What people need is what our young people need. They are skills that will give them job. You know, there's so much emphasis on certification. Certifications that don't land in job is not good enough, which is why we're saying, I mean, those are all the things we talked about. That's why we find 4 key priorities: monetary stability, policy consistency, look at some sectoral reform, and pay attention to our human capital development.
Now, let's look at, you've talked about the fiscal and the monetary side, which we all know that, yes, there needs to be proper synergy. We've seen stimulus packages especially from the central bank, and even the central bank governor came to talk about the percentage to GDP, about 4%, where other countries like South Africa, China, America are doing far better. But the impact is what I'm even worried about. What would you say about the impact in trying to reduce poverty and unemployment, which is also very, very, the negative effect of this cannot be overemphasized at this time?
I mean, sorry, I didn't hear you very well. Are you talking about the level of debt to GDP?
No. I was talking about the support from the Apex Bank, stimulus packages. You know, we've seen a lot of rollout funds for MSMEs, even for big companies and all of that. What's the effect? How well would you say this is impacting Nigerians, talking about our population and all of that?
Well, to a large extent, there's a limit to what central bank can do. They've done the best that they can do. There must have been significant savings and investment. You know, already, I mean, when you started, you talked about IMF saying that CBN is doing a lot of deficit financing, right? You know, but then that's what every nation of the world are doing. But you can't do that if your economy is not strong enough. So when people say central bank do more than you are doing, the question is from where are they going to be doing it? You know, so they can continue to run deficit ad infinitum, but it has significant problem for the Nigerian market. So it means that there's a limit to what central bank can do. How do we do? What are the other things that are possible? Some people will go and say, okay, we'll go and borrow. And again, we have concerns about borrowing, because if we borrow and we borrow for consumption without production, we're still going to have problem with how do we service our debts. So what then do you do? Sometimes some people will say, let's sell the assets we have. Let government rethink some of the work they are doing. Are there things that government is doing that they need to privatize? Again, you find out that this is a challenge in Nigeria. Many Nigerians don't want to hear the word privatization. I'll give you a good example. We're on a JV with our oil majors. And some of the reasons that some of those work have not grown far is that when the time for cash call comes, we don't have those funds. But you see, how many of us have heard about NLNG saying they can't make their trades, they can't raise the money? But then government does not necessarily have to own 51%, 60% like we do with our JVs. But if you sell that to Nigeria will say, oh, we are selling our assets. So, so if you are not selling the assets, then the only thing available for you is to attract investment. So we're not attracting investment, we're not selling assets, we're not liberalizing government, we're not cutting down government size, right? And at the same time, we want central bank to fund. There's a limit to what central bank can do. Is it enough? No, it is not enough. Can they do better given the circumstances that they have? I think they can do more than they. Now, one of the problems with our palliatives and our involvement is that because we have not paid sufficient attention to data, people have complained about how well have they distributed it. Have we reached to the lowest of the lowest? Have we reached out to the people that were most impacted? We don't have those data. We don't have those data. And to that extent, we couldn't really say how well we reach out to the people we should reach out to. And one of the problem, again, you will see in Nigeria is that the need, anytime we talk about Nigeria, we all want to do everything federal character. So rather than look at who is most affected, so rather than even divide what we will divide based on need, we look at it based on character. So yes, if people say CBN has not done enough, well, I won't blame them. But how much can CBN do in the face of the challenges that we have?
CEO, can we end it on this note? If we can do this in less than 2 minutes. IMF is also saying that Nigeria should look at increasing VAT to 10% from 7.5%, just to get more money to fund. We know what's happening with the budget deficit. Do you see that as a right step to take at this time?
Well, if an economy is doing well and you increase our VAT, it's not a problem at all because, again, our VAT compared to other nations is still very low. But the issue isn't even those increases. Some of us are of the view that let us really look at our total tax and reform environment. There are too many leakages in government. Resources that are supposed to come to government all do not come to government. So if we are very efficient in our collection, if we are very efficient in broadening the net, then we probably will solve more problems than just increasing. Sometimes what I tell people is that you are always punishing the man that is paying tax. Well, I can say VAT is a function of consumption. So if they VAT you too much, then don't consume it. But again, that will have impact on some other sectors of the economy. So what I would rather will do is that before we go on to increasing, can we make our election very efficient? Can we block all the leakages that we have in government? Of government, the consolidated account. So we need to look at all these leakages. If you block these leakages effectively, maybe we may not need to increase the rate of taxes, whether they be VAT or whatever. So, but then if you continue to increase without being efficient, we're just throwing money we're just putting water into a basket. That's what I think.
All right. Mr. Lauri Jayola, Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, will definitely have part 2 of this discussion because I know that document is voluminous. We can't just exhaust it in one day. With your time, I know you're busy, but you will let us know when we can continue this discussion. Thank you very much for joining us on the show this afternoon. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me, John.